The rain came down hard that Thursday afternoon, the kind that doesn't just fall but slants sideways, soaking everything in its path. Puddles formed fast on the cracked sidewalk, and the wind tugged at the hoods of anyone brave enough to be outside. Most kids had already ducked into their homes or huddled under bus stop awnings, eager to escape the cold, wet mess. But one boy, 12 years old and wearing a thin hoodie that offered little protection, was walking home from school with his backpack slung over one shoulder, water dripping off the brim of his baseball cap. He lived in a quiet part of the city, not the kind of place you'd see on postcards, but not dangerous either. Just rows of small houses and low-rise apartment buildings where people minded their own business but still said hello when they passed on the street. His mom worked long hours at the hospital, so he'd gotten used to coming home to an empty house, making himself a snack and starting his homework before she got back, usually well after dark. As he turned the corner onto Maple Street, he saw an older man near the curb struggling with something. The man was standing beside a dark sedan parked crookedly against the curb, its trunk open. Rainwater pooled around his shoes and his thin jacket was already soaked through. He was trying to carry 3 large cardboard boxes at once, arms trembling under their weight, and one of them was starting to sag at the bottom. The boy didn't think twice. He jogged over, water splashing around his sneakers. "Need a hand?" he asked, raising his voice over the drumming rain. The man looked up, surprised. His face was lined with age, his silver hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He hesitated for just a second, maybe wondering if this kid was really offering help or just passing by, but then nodded. "That'd be mighty kind of you," he said, his voice rough but gentle. The boy dropped his backpack under the narrow overhang of the building's entrance, just enough to keep it dry, and took 2 of the boxes. They were heavier than they looked, filled with what felt like books or tools. Together they walked slowly toward the apartment building across the street. The man moved carefully, favoring one leg, and the boy matched his pace without being asked. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. They climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, the boxes growing heavier with each step. At the top, the man fumbled with his keys, finally opening the door to a small but tidy apartment. Sunlight usually streamed through the windows, but today everything was gray and muted. "Just set them there by the bookshelf," the man said, nodding toward a corner. The boy did as he was told, then stood awkwardly for a moment, water dripping from his sleeves onto the hardwood floor. "Sorry about the mess," he mumbled. "No mess at all," the man said, already pulling a clean towel from a kitchen drawer. He handed it to the boy. "Here, dry off before you catch a chill." The boy took it, rubbing his arms and hair. He noticed the apartment was full of books, framed photos on the walls, and a single armchair by the window. "It felt lived in, peaceful. You live here alone?" the boy asked before he could stop himself. The man smiled faintly. "For now, just passing through while I sort out some things." There was a pause. Outside, the rain kept falling. "Thanks again," the man said. "Not many folks stop to help these days, especially not in this weather." The boy shrugged. It wasn't a big deal, but to the man it clearly was. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill. "Here," he said, holding it out. "For your trouble." The boy stepped back, shaking his head. "No, I don't need that, really." The man studied him for a long moment, then slowly put the money away. "All right," he said softly. "But I won't forget it." The boy zipped up his damp hoodie, picked up his backpack, and headed for the door. "Stay dry," the man called after him. "You too," the boy replied, already stepping back into the rain. He walked home feeling cold and wet, but also strangely warm inside. He hadn't done anything special, just helped someone who needed it. That's what his mom always said. If you see someone struggling, lend a hand. Doesn't matter who they are. By the time he got home, his shoes squelched with every step. He peeled off his socks, wrung out his hoodie, and made a quick grilled cheese sandwich, the one thing he could cook without burning the kitchen down. As he ate at the small kitchen table, he thought about the old man's tired eyes and the weight of those boxes. He wondered what was in them. Books, clothes, memories. He didn't think about it for long. Homework waited, and his mom wouldn't be home for hours. He turned on the small lamp, opened his math workbook, and got to work. Meanwhile, across the street, the old man stood by his window, watching the rain slow to a drizzle. He hadn't planned to stay in this neighborhood long, just long enough to handle some legal matters after his wife passed. But something about that boy, The way he'd shown up without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. It reminded him of someone. His own grandson, maybe, who'd been gone too soon. Or maybe it was just the kind of decency he thought had disappeared from the world. He sighed, turned away from the window and glanced at the boxes the boy had carried. One held legal documents, another photo albums. The third, his late wife's favorite teacups wrapped carefully in newspaper. He hadn't asked the boy's name, but he'd remember his face. And in the quiet of that rainy afternoon, neither of them knew that a simple act of kindness, carrying a few boxes in the rain, was about to change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The luxury cars, the scholarships, the unexpected friendship. None of that existed yet. There was only a wet sidewalk, a tired old man, and a boy who did the right thing simply because it was right. And sometimes, that's enough to start something extraordinary. A week passed, and life settled back into its usual rhythm. The rain had stopped, the puddles dried up, and the boy went to school, did his homework, and waited for his mom to come home from her shifts at the hospital. He hadn't thought much more about the old man with the boxes. Just a small moment in a busy week, like tying his shoes or feeding the neighbor's cat when they were away. But on Saturday morning, something unusual happened. His mom was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone before her afternoon shift. The boy was at the table, trying to fix a wobbly leg on his desk chair with duct tape and a screwdriver he'd borrowed from Mr. Ruiz next door. The phone rang, a real ring, not a text or a notification. That was rare enough to make them both look up. She answered it, her voice calm at first, then shifting into polite confusion. Yes, I remember. Oh, really? That's very kind, but... No, he didn't mention anything. She glanced at her son, eyebrows raised, then said, Of course, we'd be happy to have you over. When she hung up, she turned to him. That was the man you helped last week. The one with the boxes, the boy blinked. Oh, okay. He wants to stop by. Says he'd like to thank you properly. The boy shrugged. I already told him it wasn't a big deal. I know, his mom said gently, but maybe it was to him. She cleaned up a bit, wiped the counters, fluffed the couch pillows, put away the laundry basket that had been sitting in the living room for 2 days. Not that their home was messy, just lived in. Real. Photos of family on the fridge, mismatched mugs in the cupboard, a worn-out rug by the front door. Around noon, they heard a car pull up. Not the usual sound of a neighbor's sedan or a delivery van, but something quieter, smoother, like it rolled over the pavement instead of driving on it. The boy peeked through the window. A black car, long and shiny, sat at the curb. It looked expensive, but not flashy. Just solid. A man stepped out. Same old man from last week, but now dressed in a crisp white shirt, a dark sweater, and shoes that probably cost more than their monthly grocery bill. Yet he moved the same way, careful, calm, unhurried. He walked up the path, knocked lightly, and smiled when the door opened. Thank you for having me, he said. Please. Come in, the boy's mom said, stepping aside. He didn't rush in. He wiped his shoes on the mat, even though the sidewalk was dry, and stepped inside like he was entering someone's home for the first time, which, in a way, he was. They sat in the living room. The boy stayed quiet, sitting on the edge of the couch, hands in his lap. His mom offered tea, but the man politely declined. I won't take much of your time, he began. I just wanted to meet you both properly. Last week, what your son did, it meant more than he knows. He paused, looking around the room, not like he was judging, but like he was taking it all in. The bookshelf filled with school books and a few dog-eared novels. The framed drawing the boy had made in 5th grade. The small potted plant on the windowsill that somehow still lived despite being forgotten for weeks at a time. My name is Elias, he said finally. I used to run a company, Freight and Logistics. Moved goods across the country for 40 years. Built it from nothing, sold it a while back, retired early, or tried to anyway. He chuckled softly, but there was sadness underneath it. My wife passed last year. After that, everything felt empty. I've been sorting through things, her belongings, our house, legal stuff. That's why I'm staying in that apartment across the street for now. Just temporary. The boy's mom nodded slowly. I'm so sorry for your loss. Elias looked at the boy. You didn't ask for anything. Didn't even tell your mom what you'd done. Most kids your age would have mentioned it, maybe even bragged a little, but you just did it and walked away. The boy shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. I just saw you needed help. That's the thing, Elias said, his voice softening. So many people see someone in need and look away, or assume someone else will step in, but you didn't. You saw and you acted. That kind of character. It's rare. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. Not thick, not flashy, just plain white. I don't want to insult you, he said carefully, and I'm not trying to buy your kindness, but I'd like to help. Your mom works hard. You're a good kid with a bright future. Let me make a few things easier. He handed the envelope to the boy's mom. She opened it slowly. Inside was a check. Not a huge amount. Enough to cover their overdue electric bill and the dentist appointment the boy had been putting off, but more than they could spare right then. She looked up, eyes glistening. We can't accept this. Please, Elias said gently. Think of it as an investment. In decency, in hope. She hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. They talked a little longer, about school, about the neighborhood, about how the city had changed over the years. Elias didn't ask personal questions. He listened more than he spoke. And when he stood to leave, he turned to the boy. If you ever want someone to talk to about school, about life, even about fixing that chair, I'm just across the street. My door's open. The boy nodded. Okay, Elias smiled. And next time it rains, maybe bring an umbrella. After he left, the boy and his mom sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the black car pulled away smoothly, disappearing around the corner. He seems genuine, she said finally. Yeah, the boy replied. He's nice, but something had shifted. It wasn't just about a check or a kind visit. It was the way Elias looked at him. Not like a charity case, not like a kid who needed fixing, but like someone worth believing in. Over the next few days, the boy noticed Elias more often, walking slowly to the corner store, sitting on the bench outside his building in the afternoons, reading a book. Once the boy waved. Elias waved back. Then, one Tuesday after school, the boy saw a flyer in his backpack, a notice about a free summer STEM camp at the community college. It said scholarship available, but he knew those usually went to kids with connections or perfect grades. His were good but not perfect. That evening, he mentioned it at dinner. His mom sighed. It's a great opportunity, but the application fee alone is $50, and if you got in, there'd be supplies, transportation. She didn't finish. They both knew. The next morning, a plain envelope was taped to their front door. Inside was a printed acceptance letter for the STEM camp, already filled out with the boy's information and a note. Sometimes doors open when you least expect them. Walk through this one. No signature. No explanation. Just trust. The boy stared at the paper, heart pounding. He ran to show his mom. She read it twice, then hugged him tight. He didn't even ask, she whispered. He just knew. From that day on, Elias started stopping by once a week. Not to give things, but to talk. He'd bring a chess set and teach the boy how to think 3 moves ahead. He'd quiz him on science facts or tell stories about building his business from a single truck and a borrowed phone. He never talked down, never acted like he was doing them a favor. He just showed up, steady, quiet, present. And slowly, without either of them saying it out loud, something real began to grow between them. Not just gratitude or generosity, but something deeper, respect, connection, the kind that starts with a small act and grows into something that changes everything. But neither of them knew yet just how far that change would go, or that soon, the whole neighborhood would be talking about the day 3 luxury cars lined up outside their modest home. Weeks turned into months, and what started as a simple thank you visit became something steady and real. Every Saturday morning, right around 10, the same black car would ease to a stop across the street, and Elias would walk over with a paper bag in hand, sometimes filled with pastries from the bakery downtown, other times with books he thought the boy might like. He never knocked loudly or barged in. He'd wait patiently on the porch until someone opened the door, always respectful of their space, their time, their life. At first, the boy was quiet around him, unsure what to say to a man who'd built a company from nothing and now spent his Saturdays teaching a kid how to play chess. But Elias never made him feel small. He asked questions, real ones. Not just how's school, but what part of history fascinates you the most? Or if you could invent something to make life easier for your mom, what would it be? And he actually listened to the answers. Slowly, the boy started looking forward to those Saturdays. He'd finish his chores early, straighten his room, even try to fix that wobbly chair leg again, this time with proper wood glue Elias brought over. They'd sit at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, and talk about everything: how bridges stay up, why the sky turns orange at sunset, what it felt like to start a business with only $20 in your pocket and a borrowed phone. Elias never bragged. He spoke about his past like it was just another story, full of mistakes, lucky breaks, and hard lessons. Success isn't about how much you have, he once said, moving a pawn across the board. It's about what you do with what you've got, and how you treat the people along the way. The boy remembered that. Meanwhile, little things began to shift in their home, quietly, without fanfare. The overdue bills that used to pile up on the counter, they disappeared. The leaky kitchen faucet that dripped all night, fixed by a plumber who showed up one Tuesday with a friendly nod and said, "Already paid for." The boy's worn-out sneakers, the ones with the hole near the toe, replaced with a new pair left in a bag on the doorstep, no note, just the right size. His mom noticed, of course. She'd come home from a long shift, exhausted, and find the house a little lighter, a little less heavy. She never asked Elias directly. She was too proud for that. But one evening after he'd left, she sat at the table with her son and said softly, "He's not just helping you. He's helping us both." The boy nodded. He knew. Then came the summer. The STEM camp Elias had arranged turned out to be more than just a few weeks of building robots and launching model rockets. It was the first time the boy had been around other kids who got excited about equations and engineering. He made friends. He asked questions. He stayed late to help clean up. On the last day, the camp director pulled him aside. "You've got real talent," she said. "Ever thought about applying to the city's advanced science program next year?" He hadn't. But that night he told Elias. The next Saturday, instead of chess, Elias brought a thick folder. Inside were applications, sample essays, and a list of scholarships. "I'll help you fill them out," he said. "But the words have to be yours." They spent the next 3 weekends at the kitchen table, drafting, revising, laughing at clumsy sentences, and drinking too much tea. The boy wrote about fixing things: broken chairs, leaky faucets, even his mom's tired smile after a double shift. He wrote about how helping someone carry boxes in the rain taught him that small actions matter. He didn't write about Elias. He didn't need to. It was all there between the lines. When the acceptance letter came, his mom cried. The program was competitive, expensive, and located across town, but the letter said his full tuition had been covered by an anonymous donor. They both knew who it was. Elias didn't say a word when they told him. He just smiled, reached into his coat, and handed the boy a brand new notebook with a mechanical pencil tucked into the spine. "For your first day," he said, but it wasn't just school. Elias started showing up during the week, too. Not often, but enough. He'd take the boy to the library, sit quietly while he studied, or drive him to the hardware store when he needed parts for a science project. Once, when the boy's mom had to work an emergency overnight shift, Elias stayed with him, making grilled cheese sandwiches and watching an old documentary about space. Neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Chen from next door would wave from her garden. Mr. Ruiz would nod as they passed on the sidewalk. "That old man really took a shine to your boy," he told the mom one day. She just smiled and said, "He's got a good heart." What no one knew, not the neighbors, not even the boy at first, was that Elias had begun quietly changing his own plans. He'd originally intended to sell his late wife's house upstate and move into a retirement community, but now he found reasons to stay. He renewed the lease on the apartment. He started attending school board meetings just to hear about local programs. He even donated new microscopes to the middle school science lab, again anonymously. One afternoon, while they were walking back from the library, the boy asked, "Why do you do all this for me?" Elias stopped walking. He looked at the boy for a long moment, his eyes soft. "Because the world tries to tell kids like you that your circumstances define you," he said. "That if you live in a small house with a tired mom and worn-out shoes, you don't get to dream big. But I've seen enough in my life to know that's not true. What matters is what's inside you. And you've got more inside you than most people twice your age." The boy didn't know what to say, so he just walked a little taller the rest of the way home. As summer ended and school started again, their routine deepened. Elias wasn't a replacement for anyone. He wasn't trying to be a father or a savior. He was just there, a steady presence, a quiet believer. And the boy began to believe in himself too. He joined the robotics club. He stayed after school for extra math help. He started tutoring younger kids in the neighborhood, showing them how to solve problems the way Elias had taught him, with patience, logic, and a little kindness. He didn't know it yet. But all of this, the mentorship, the support, the quiet acts of care, was building toward something bigger. Something that would soon roll down their street in the form of gleaming cars and stunned neighbors. But for now, it was just two people, one young, one old, sitting at a kitchen table, talking about the future like it was something they could shape together, one small decision at a time. The morning of the boy's 13th birthday dawned clear and bright, the kind of crisp fall day that smells like fallen leaves and fresh air. He woke up early not because of excitement. Birthdays had been quiet for years, but because his mind was already racing with the robotics competition coming up next week. He tiptoed into the kitchen, made himself a bowl of cereal, and sat by the window, sketching ideas for a new gear mechanism in his notebook. His mom had left a note on the fridge. "Happy birthday." Left a surprise in the oven. "Don't burn it warming up." "Love you," he smiled. The surprise was probably the leftover cake from Mrs. Chen's grandson's party last weekend. But he didn't mind. It was the thought that counted. Around 10, he heard the familiar sound of Elias's car pulling up. He figured it was just another Saturday visit. Maybe they'd go to the library or work on his science project. But when he opened the front door, his jaw dropped. 3 cars were parked along the curb. Not just nice cars, luxury cars. One was long and gleaming black with chrome trim that caught the sunlight like liquid silver. Another was deep navy blue, low and sleek, with wheels that looked like they belonged in a magazine. The third was older, a classic model with white walls on the tires and a polished hood that shone like glass. They looked completely out of place on their quiet street of modest homes and aging sedans. Neighbors were already peeking out of windows. Mr. Ruiz stood on his porch, arms crossed, squinting like he couldn't believe his eyes. 2 kids from down the block stopped their bikes mid-ride. Staring open-mouthed, Elias stepped out of the black car, dressed in a dark suit and a crisp white shirt, looking more formal than the boy had ever seen him. But his expression was calm, almost gentle. Behind him came a woman in a tailored blazer holding a leather portfolio, and a man in a driver's uniform who stood respectfully by the car door. The boy just stood there, barefoot in his socks, cereal bowl still in hand. Elias walked up the path, his shoes clicking softly on the concrete. "Happy birthday," he said, his voice warm but steady. Thanks," the boy managed, glancing back at the cars. "What's all this?" Elias didn't answer right away. He turned to the boy's mom, who had just come to the door, her nurse's scrubs still on from an early shift, her eyes wide with shock. "May we come in?" Elias asked. She nodded quickly, stepping aside. Inside, the woman with the portfolio laid out several documents on the kitchen table, neatly printed, carefully organized. Elias pulled out 3 envelopes. One was thick, one was medium, and one was small but sealed with a red wax stamp. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," Elias began, sitting at the table like this was just another Saturday chat. "And I realized something important. Kindness like yours shouldn't go unnoticed. It should be nurtured, protected, given room to grow." He slid the thick envelope toward the boy's mom. "This is a full scholarship fund. It covers everything: high school, college, even graduate studies if he chooses. Tuition, books, housing, supplies, all managed through a trust so it's secure and lasts as long as he needs it." She stared at it like it might vanish if she touched it. "We can't. This is too much." "It's not charity," Elias said firmly but kindly. "It's an investment in him, in what he'll become." Then he turned to the boy and handed him the medium envelope. "This is for you. A laptop, science kits, summer programs, travel for competitions, anything that helps you learn, build, and explore. You'll have a mentor from my old company to help you choose the right opportunities. But the choices are yours." The boy's hands trembled as he took it. He didn't open it. He just held it like it was something sacred. Finally, Elias placed the small, wax-sealed envelope in the center of the table. "And this," he said, "is an invitation. My estate is about an hour north. Woods, a lake, a workshop bigger than this whole house. You and your mom are welcome to stay this summer. There's room, peace, and plenty of projects to tinker with. No pressure. Just an open door. Silence filled the room. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Someone whispered, "Are those Rolls Royces?" Elias looked around. Not at the documents, not at the money, but at the two of them. "I lost someone I loved," he said quietly. "And for a long time I thought the best I could do was remember her. But then I met you, and I realized maybe the best way to honor her isn't just to remember, it's to pass on the kind of goodness she believed in." He stood up. "I'm not trying to change your life overnight. I'm just trying to make sure nothing stands in the way of the life you're already building." The boy finally found his voice. "Why us?" Elias smiled. "Because you helped a stranger in the rain without expecting anything back. That's not common. That's rare. And rare things deserve to be protected." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Oh, and those cars? They're not gifts. They belong to friends of mine. We're having a small gathering later. Just wanted to make sure I arrived properly for your birthday." And with that he walked out. But the moment he stepped onto the porch, the neighborhood erupted. People came out of their houses, some with phones, others just staring in disbelief. Kids ran up asking if the boy was famous now. Mrs. Chen brought over a plate of cookies for the celebration. Even the mailman stopped his route to take a photo. The boy's mom hugged him tight. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He nodded, tears in his eyes, not from the cars or the money, but from the weight of being seen. Truly seen, not as a kid from a struggling home, but as someone worth believing in. Later that afternoon, after the crowd had thinned and the cars had driven away one by one, the boy sat on the front steps, the wax-sealed envelope in his lap. He hadn't opened it yet. He didn't need to. He already knew what it meant. It wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about fame. It was about trust. About someone saying, "I see your heart. Now go build something beautiful with it." And for the first time, he truly believed he could. Years passed, but the memory of that rainy afternoon never faded. It stayed with the boy like a compass. Quiet, steady, always pointing him back to what mattered. Now in his second year of college, studying civil engineering, he still carried that same worn notebook from his 13th birthday, though its pages were filled with sketches of bridges, drainage systems, and sustainable housing designs instead of gear mechanisms. He hadn't become famous. There were no headlines, no viral videos, just a life built slowly, carefully, with purpose. Every summer, he and his mom still spent a few weeks at Elias's estate up north. The old man's health had slowed him down, but his mind was sharp, and his workshop remained a sanctuary of sawdust, blueprints, and long talks over lemonade on the porch. They never talked about the money or the cars anymore. They talked about ideas, how to design a community center that could withstand floods, how to bring clean water to neighborhoods that had gone without for too long. Elias had long since stopped calling him kid. Now, he introduced him as my friend, or the young man who's going to fix this world better than we did. Back in the city, the boy made sure to give back in the same quiet way kindness had once been given to him. Every Thursday after class, he volunteered at the youth center in his old neighborhood. He didn't just tutor math or help with science fair projects, he listened. He remembered what it felt like to be overlooked, to think your dreams were too big for your circumstances, so he made space for kids who felt the same. One rainy Thursday, eerily like the day years ago, he spotted a younger boy struggling to carry grocery bags for an elderly woman outside the corner store. Without thinking, he jogged over, took the heavier bags, and walked them both home. The woman thanked him with tears in her eyes. The boy just nodded and said, "It's no trouble." Later that evening at the youth center, he told the story to a group of teens gathered around a table building solar-powered model cars. "People think big moments change lives," he said, tightening a wire with pliers. "But most of the time it's the small ones. Holding a door, carrying a box, saying you got this when someone's about to give up. That's what sticks." One girl raised her hand. "But what if no one notices?" he smiled. "You don't do it for them to notice. You do it because it's right. And sometimes, years later, you find out it mattered more than you ever knew." He never forgot that lesson, and he made sure others didn't either. Every holiday season, without fail, a small package appeared on Elias's doorstep at the estate. Inside, always wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with twine, were tamales, homemade by his mom just like she used to make when he was little. No fancy box, no card with grand words. Just food made with care, delivered quietly like a promise kept. Elias always called the next day. Best part of the season, he'd say, voice warm over the phone. Better than any gift. Their bond had deepened into something that didn't need labels. Not father and son, not mentor and student, but something rarer. Two people who chose each other again and again, through time and distance and change. When the boy presented his senior design project, a low-cost, flood-resistant housing prototype for underserved communities, Elias was there in the front row, leaning on a cane but sitting tall. After the presentation, he didn't clap loudly or shout praise. He just squeezed the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Your grandmother would have been proud of you." It was the highest compliment he could give. Now, as the boy prepared for graduation, he'd been offered internships with major engineering firms, even a chance to work abroad. But his first choice was a nonprofit, focused on rebuilding infrastructure in areas hit by natural disasters, places where a sturdy bridge or a clean water system could mean the difference between survival and struggle. His mom, now working part-time so she could finally breathe, framed his acceptance letter and hung it next to his fifth-grade drawing on the fridge. "You're doing it," she said one night over dinner. "Building the world you always wanted to see?" He nodded. "With a little help from someone who believed in me before I believed in myself." Back in the neighborhood, people still talked about the day the luxury cars lined the street. But the story had changed over time. It wasn't about the cars anymore. It was about the boy who helped a stranger, and how that one act opened a door not to fame or fortune, but to a life of meaning. Kids at the youth center now called it the ripple rule. Do one good thing, and you never know how far it'll go. And every so often, when a new kid walked in looking unsure or overwhelmed, the boy would pull up a chair, slide over a notebook, and say, "Tell me what you're good at, because I've seen what happens when someone like you decides to try." He knew now that real change didn't roar. It whispered. It showed up in rainy afternoons, in quiet envelopes, in shared silence over a chessboard. It lived in the spaces between grand gestures, in the everyday choices to be kind, to show up, to care. Years later, long after he'd built his first real bridge and stood on it watching children cross safely after a storm, he'd think back to those boxes in the rain, not as the start of his success, but as the moment he learned that the smallest hands can hold the heaviest hope. And whenever he passed a stranger struggling with a load too big to carry alone, he'd stop. Every time, because some lessons don't just shape your future, they become your legacy. The story was never supposed to have a sixth part. It felt complete. Boy helped stranger, kindness repaid, lives changed, lessons passed on. But life doesn't always wrap up neatly. Sometimes, just when you think the chapter is closed, a new page quietly turns. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in early spring. The boy, now a young man in his mid-20s, was back in the city for a short break between projects. He'd just finished overseeing the construction of a community water filtration system in a rural town 2 states away, and his body ached with the kind of tired that only comes from work that matters. He'd come home to rest, to eat his mom's cooking, and to visit Elias, who had been quieter on the phone lately, his voice thinner, his pauses longer. That morning, he walked to the old neighborhood not out of habit, but out of need. The streets looked smaller somehow, the trees taller. Kids played where he once rode his bike, their laughter echoing off the same brick walls. He stopped by the youth center, now expanded, with a new wing funded by a grant he'd helped write, and spent an hour helping a group of teenagers troubleshoot a solar-powered irrigation model for their school garden. On his way back, he passed the apartment building across the street from his childhood home, the one where it all began. The windows were different now, new blinds, a potted plant on the sill, but the steps were the same. He stood there for a moment, remembering the weight of those boxes, the smell of wet cardboard, the quiet gratitude in an old man's eyes. He didn't notice the elderly woman watching him from the second-floor window until she waved. Curious, he waved back. A minute later, she appeared at the door, leaning on a cane but standing straight. Her hair was white, her hands spotted with age, but her eyes were bright. "You're the boy," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. He nodded. "I used to live just over there," she smiled. "I know, I've seen you around. Heard the stories too." She paused. "My husband lived in this apartment for a few months years back. Said a young man helped him carry boxes in the rain. Never forgot it, the young man's breath caught. That was me." Her smile widened. I thought so. She stepped aside. Come in for a minute. I've got tea. He hesitated, then followed her inside. The apartment had changed. New furniture, family photos on the walls, the scent of cinnamon in the air. But something felt familiar. Maybe it was the way the light fell through the window in the afternoon, or the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from him. My husband passed last winter, she said gently, peacefully in his sleep. He was 92. I'm so sorry, he said. Don't be, she replied. He lived a full life, and in his last years, he had purpose again, because of you. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges, sealed with the same red wax he remembered from his 13th birthday. He left this for you, she said. Said if you ever came back here, I should give it to you. If not, well, he trusted you'd find your way. Hands trembling slightly, he opened it. The handwriting was shaky but clear. If you're reading this, it means you haven't forgotten where you started. And that's everything. I told people you changed my life. But the truth is, you reminded me what life was for. Not just to build things, but to build people up. Not just to leave wealth, but to leave worth. You've done that already. But don't stop. The world still needs hands that help, hearts that listen, and minds that build with compassion. One last thing. That apartment you helped me move into, I bought it after I left. Not for me, for kids like you. It's now a scholarship housing unit for students in the city's youth mentorship program. Rent-free, utilities covered, quiet place to study. You helped carry boxes into this place. Now, because of you, others will carry their dreams in, with gratitude that never fades. E. The young man read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and held it to his chest. He never told me, he whispered. He didn't want praise, the woman said. He wanted impact. They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, watching the afternoon light shift across the floor. Before he left, she handed him a key. It's yours if you ever need it. Not to live in, but to visit. To remember, he took it. It was small, ordinary, but it felt heavy with meaning. That evening, he walked back to his mom's house, the same small place he'd grown up in, now freshly painted, with a new porch swing and flower boxes under the windows. She was in the kitchen humming as she stirred a pot of soup. Long day? She asked. He sat at the table, the letter in his hand. Yeah, but a good one. He told her everything, the visit, the letter. The apartment turned into a home for other kids with big dreams and thin wallets. She listened quietly, then wiped her hands on her apron and hugged him. He saw you, she said simply, and you let him. Later that night he sat on the porch swing, the city lights twinkling in the distance. He thought about all the kids who would now walk up those same steps, open that same door, and find a safe place to grow. He thought about the boy he'd been, soaking wet, carrying boxes, not knowing he was carrying hope. And he realized something. The story wasn't just about him and Elias. It was about everyone who came after. The ripple hadn't stopped. It was still moving. The next morning he called the youth center. I'd like to start a new program, he said. Call it the Box Project. Every kid who volunteers 50 hours gets help applying for housing scholarships, tutoring, even tools for their projects. And we'll tell them the story, about a rainy day, a few cardboard boxes, and how one act can build a future. The director laughed. You know, people always ask if that story's true. He smiled. Tell them it's still happening. Because kindness isn't a single event. It's a chain, a current, a quiet force that keeps flowing long after the first drop falls. And somewhere in an apartment above a quiet street, a new student unpacked their books, looked out the window, and wondered who had carried the boxes before them. They'd never know the name. But they'd live the legacy,